All right, time for some more folk tales. We're going to read this week some African folk tales. Most of the folk tales we're going to read, whoa, I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to move us, are going to include the character Anansi.
And when we talked about the characteristics of folk tales, one thing was that they had a trickster character. Mm-hmm. And in the African culture, a trickster character is Anansi the spider. It's not always spelled this way, Miss Mom. They spell it all different
Yeah, and I'm looking
ways.
All of these on this virtual library here. Well, look, this down here has a Z. We've seen his name spelled I-E with a Y. Just a lot. Sometimes he's just called Spider.
Yes.
And in fact, you're going to watch a video today with Anansi the spider, and in that one, he's not called Anansi. He's just, or maybe he is called Anansi. But in the cartoon video of it, he looks like a man with all these arms. It's kind of an odd depiction.
And what they're doing is they're personifying. They're making an animal have human characteristics, and they do kind of illustrate it strangely.
So this week, whoa.
We're going all different sizes, Miss Nala.
I'm struggling with this thing. Our target this week is being able to determine the lesson of the folktale and using details from the summary. We've done some of that when we were reading those other folktales, and you were doing the 5-finger retell. You were determining the lesson. We've talked about that as we've been doing summaries before, so it's not brand new. We're just more of we're just targeting on the lesson.
Keep it on, focusing in on that lesson.
So, why people tell stories? Every human culture in the world has a way of creating stories to make sense of the world, particularly before they had a lot of knowledge about why things occurred or why things in nature happen. They would just make up stories.
And then they would tell those stories and they would get passed on. That's why they call them retelling.
Woo, let me go back here. Well, I was going to go back. Maybe I can't go back. Yes, I mean, the retelling, passing it on from one generation to the other. Mr. Stephen, Miss Taylor's husband, loves to tell stories.
He is a storyteller.
He is a good storyteller. And she has told stories about how he would tell stories to their kids.
He created Rocky and Buford and told, especially Rachel, all kinds of Rocky and Buford stories. I really wish we had recorded those in some way.
But my guess is Miss Taylor, Rachel will grow up. Well, she already is growing up. But one day when she's married and has children, she'll probably pass on some Rocky and Buford stories and tell her kids. And, we sat around our fire pit over the long weekend and told spooky stories with Charlotte, and she was telling stories, and it's just sitting around, and that's what people did long ago. They sat around, it was for fun, told stories, and then those stories are retold. Let me go back to present mode here.
Okay. In the African culture, they loved to tell stories. They are primarily an oral people.
Means by mouth.
Their stories were more told orally than written down. Yeah. They were often created to be performed with music and dance.
So some of these videos, if you watch some of the videos, you might hear the drums or sometimes the music in the background. These stories tell history. A lot of times it's about culture, tradition, history. The way they tell the stories will depict what's important in that culture. And in the African culture, it's the music and the drums and the colors and things like that.
Tomorrow maybe we'll show you a map of where Africa is in the world and let you kind of get a feel for that.
Let's see, sometimes the story changes with the telling. So, even one of these Anansi stories that we're going to read, in fact, the story you're going to read in a little while, I found a video of the same story, but it was a little different than the text version.
And we've talked about that, the stories of Goldilocks or the Three Little Bears. It depends on who's telling the story, how it sounds.
So Anansi, and see, again, he's spelled a little differently here than he has that E. With an E, with an I, with a Y. You might see it spelled lots of different ways. But he's one of the most popular characters in these West African stories.
He's a trickster. He is going to have those human characteristics that basically they're telling that story to teach their children a lesson. And it's a human lesson, not a spider lesson. So that's why they personify the characters.
Sometimes well, I'm not even going to tell you some character traits. We're going to read some of his stories.
Sort of tricky.
Yeah. Besides that, we know he's tricky. We'll see what kind of character traits we can come up with for him as we see it. And he's not always the same in every story,
No.
but there is a common theme of character traits for him.
Just like if we read the Jeannie B. Jones story, there's going to be some similarities between the way Jeannie B. acts in every story. Same way in these stories.
On the next slide, you need to go back to our Google slide, and on the next slide, you're going to watch Anansi and the Pot of Beans. It's about 7 minutes, but watch the story. As you're watching it, be thinking of how you could summarize it, how you could tell, the problem, what he did, the important events, how it was solved, what lesson should he have learned. 2 or 3 lessons we come up with. And
sometimes these characters aren't real bright because over and over in every story they need to learn some of the same lessons.
That's right. So now go back to Google Slides, watch Anansi and the Pot of Beans. After that video, come back and we'll see you again.